coming down the hill, coming into San Carlos, there was the triplets, the plateaus, and the river.
Everything from his dream.
Everything that was in the dream.
Wow.
So he pulled off the road and said, I'll be right back. And he came back and he had this rock. I says, what's that? And he says, that's a rock of promise. We're bringing that rock back. We're gonna go home and sell everything and come back out here.
Welcome to part 1 of 3 of Sister Dee Picciuto's testimony of establishing and serving in the San Carlos, Arizona mission of the Church of Jesus Christ.
We are here today in the San Carlos mission of the Church of Jesus Christ in the San Carlos Apache reservation with Sister Dee Picciuto. You have been a missionary out here, what were you saying, 63 years? So, yeah, you've had a lifetime in the service of God. We also have with us Brother Josh and Sister Anna Vignola. And you guys just moved to San Benito.
Yes, we did.
Right near Window Rock, the heart of the Navajo Nation, to do kind of a similar path. Sister Dee, I want to start out basically with a background from your early life, because even though you've served here in the Church of Jesus Christ for all these decades, you were raised in a different faith, and it wasn't even until your teens that you got to know the church a little bit. So do you mind just sharing a little bit about your early life and some of the things that maybe prepared you for missionary work later in life?
Well, my dad was a minister in another church, and he was a missionary type minister, where he would go into an established church that was down to maybe 1 or 2 members left, and a building falling apart, and really need help. They really needed help. And he would go and he would build up the congregation. He would work really hard. This was his full-time job, and he would work really hard meeting people and teaching them about the Lord Jesus, and helping people along. And they liked his method. They would come to church, and they would accept the gospel. So he would build the church up physically with the brothers and sisters. He would remodel or rebuild the church building, and they would get money in the bank and be established. It usually took him about 5 years to get it done, and then we would move to another one. So just about the time that my mom was getting settled and enjoying the home that she had that time, they would move. And I remember one time she said the first house was really big, and they finally got it all furnished, and then they left and they went to another place where the house was really small. It only had 2 bedrooms, and the other one had 4 bedrooms. So they had to size down and get rid of stuff, and so she never knew what was going to happen next. But if the Lord called, she was willing to go. So that was the life that I had. So about every 5 years, we would move to a different place and start all over again. That's when I said, well, when I was a teenager then, I said, I definitely don't want to marry a minister. I want to marry a Christian. I want somebody that's serving God, but I do not want a minister, because I want somebody that has some money, that's working out there and has a good income. So that was my life. So.
That's so funny, because I always said I would also never marry a minister.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
So I said, well, I kind of got away with it a little bit, because he wasn't a minister when I married him. He was a minister a few years later, but still, very dedicated.
How did you meet Brother Dan then? How did that get started?
The first meeting, I was helping sell Scotchlight in a booth at the fair.
Is that tape, or what is that?
Scotchlight was a reflector tape.
Okay.
The first night of the fair, he came to the fair, he said just to check it out. He wasn't going to go anymore. Just the first night he wanted to go. So he came, and the queen of the school was my friend, and she was the one that was in the booth with me. The 2 of us were in the booth that night. And she liked Tony, Dan's brother Tony. And so she called Dan over to see how Tony was doing, because Tony was away in the Air Force. And Dan says when he saw me there, he felt the thought came to him, the lucky guy that marries that girl. So he pursued. He came back every night. But it wasn't till a few weeks later when I found out that he was a Christian that we got together, that we really met.
So you came from a different faith. What was it like to meet the Church of Jesus Christ? What was your impression?
Well, actually, the teaching was very similar. The difference was the Book of Mormon. So it took me a little while to figure that part out, because everything else seemed pretty much the same. And it was, when my dad was questioned about me going to church with Dan, well, he told them, he says, well, I raised her to love and serve God and to live that kind of a life. He says, and I believe that she's doing that, and she's old enough to make a choice of her life, how she wants to live her life. I just trust that the teachings that we gave her will remain in her life. And Dan and my dad were very close. We're very close.
So at first when you got married, then Brother Dan was not a minister yet.
No, he wasn't.
How did your early life, what did you think the trajectory of your life was going to be as you got married and everything?
I thought it would just be normal. He had a good job, and we bought a lot and built a house. We lived with my mom and dad. Both of us worked, and we were able to get our house built. And so it just took a few months, and we had the house ready, our own home. And I had several forever homes, because that was like a forever home. We built it, 3 bedrooms and plenty of room, so we could have a family, and church would be fine. We could have church there. So church was kind of instilled in my life.
So you were just talking now about you built your kind of a forever home, anticipating probably you're going to live there for a while. Mm-hmm. And then and you started your family and everything. How do you go from there to moving into the middle of, because you just bought your forever home, you're thinking, oh, this is where we're going to be forever. Yeah. And was he even a minister at that point?
No, he wasn't.
Okay, so how do you get from there to now we're living in the middle of the San Carlos Apache reservation?
First, the doctor told me that I would never be able to have children.
Okay.
At that time. And that was heartbreaking, because that was always, when somebody asked me as a young person what I wanted to be when I grew up, it would always be a mother. I love children. And so it was really heartbreaking, and that was a struggle that we had to go through and be very prayerful and work through that. And I still wasn't baptized, but we had our home, and Dan was very into praying all the time. He knew that we had to pray and trust God for whatever. So he had a dream that he had a son, and his son was a minister. He saw his son as a young man preaching, David. And but the doctor kept telling me I couldn't have children. And then I got real sick and went to the doctor, and he says, well, if I didn't know different, he says, I would say you're pregnant. And I'd say, well, why would you say that? And he says, well, because you have all the symptoms of being pregnant, but there's no way you could have a child.
Yeah.
And he says, so I'm going to put you on high risk. A high risk, if you are, it's a high risk pregnancy. He says, because if you would get pregnant, he said, there's no way you could carry a child. And so I was high risk. So I had to quit my job. And Dan says, God showed me we're going to have a son. We're going to have a son. And so the pregnancy went all the way through. And David was born. But just before David was born, Dan decided that he was going to quit his job and go into construction, because he wanted to be free to do a work for the Lord. His job kept him busy 5 days a week, and churches were being built, and he couldn't help, and he couldn't go around and do what he was just weekend things. If we would go someplace, we'd leave Friday after work and have to come back Sunday afternoon so we could go to work on Monday. So,
well, that's really interesting because I think, at least for me, as a young person going through school and everything, everyone always tells you, oh, you want to get a job where you're going to like get a lot of money, or it's going to be your passion, or it's like there's this corporate ladder and you got to put in all that overtime so you can get to the top. And I think it's cool that he had a different perspective on it, that he wants a job that's going to allow him to serve God. And maybe he won't be the CEO, or maybe he won't have the most money, but he's like, this is going to put me in a position to be available for God. And it's cool that we see now, like, God saw that and said, oh, you're available for me, and God used him. So it is cool. It's just a different way of looking at success or your career than I think most people are used to.
yeah.
Did Brother Dan have the skills to be? Because if
that-
Josh did not have the skills, I'd say, ain't no way you're not going to be doing that. So,
Well, I asked him, I says, well, what are you gonna do in construction? I mean, my dad had done construction on the side as to make an extra living when he first would go into a church. Because they weren't able to pay him, and so in order to have food on the table, he'd have to take these little jobs. So he had done some construction. But so I asked Dan, I says, what do you know about construction? Is it going to be okay? Are we going to be able to survive? And he says, well, my dad was a bricklayer, and I watched him lay brick. He says, and I used to sometimes mix the mud for him. And he says, so I can lay brick. So he went to one of the brothers that was there, was retired contractor, and he had the scaffolding, and he had the old-fashioned way of mixing the mud and all that kind of stuff. He had the equipment. And so Dan asked him, are you going to sell it? And he says, yeah. He says, I'd like to get a couple $1,000s for it. So Dan borrowed the money from his grandfather and bought the equipment. So now we had the equipment. We had no job.
right.
And nothing to do. So I remember.
With a baby coming.
And a baby coming anytime.
Yeah.
So I remember the first job he had was laying brick. He did a brick foundation for a sign for an insurance company in town. So the sign went into this brick foundation that he had built. Well, from that sign, he started getting bids.
Wow.
We'd like to have a sign. We'd like to have this. What else do you do? Oh, so then he went to laying block, and he was laying block for a living. When they were building houses, he would lay block. So that's how he got started.
I didn't realize it was in a way kind of self-taught, because he ended up doing a lot of construction around here in this property.
He from that he started building houses. He would go where a new house was being built and walk through it and see what they were doing, and then he would come back and do it. Well, of course, we had built our own home, so he had a little basic with his dad and my dad and his grandfather helping build our first house. That he had a little bit of that kind of experience. So, and he would see what other contractors were doing, and he would do it. And God blessed him. Every time he wanted to do a different phase, God would bless him with that knowledge. He did everything except the sheet metal work. He didn't do any of the sheet metal work, but he did the electrical, the plumbing, and everything that went with it. So then we decided that we would sell that house.
Your forever home you just built?
Our forever home. We would sell that house and to help us get better established in the business. So then we were Dandy Construction.
Dandy Construction? Because of Dan and D? That's funny. I like that.
That's cute.
That's how we did, and we started building houses. We went to Fredonia and helped build the church down there. And he went to Rochester, New York, and worked on the church there. And I don't know where all, but every place that they were building a new church, he would try to get there to help and be a part of the building. And in the meantime, we were starting our own mission in Painesville, which is now Perry Branch in Ohio.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so we were in our we rented a building to have church in there, and we were in there already. David was born, and before David was born, a year before David was born, I was baptized.
Okay.
So we were in that.
Was there anything that led you to that decision of baptism?
Yeah, we were at a meeting. We were in the building that we had rented in Painesville to have our meetings there. We had several young people and others that lived close, so it was easier for us to have church there. And Brother Rocco Biscotti was our minister. He would drive out from Cleveland and take care of the services for us. And we had just one of the meetings. We just had this terrific meeting, and I just felt God calling me that this is where I was supposed to be. And so I asked for my baptism, and another sister asked for her baptism that day also. And then after that, a year after that is when I had David. So. And
then when did Brother Dan become ordained a minister?
He was ordained a minister right after David was born.
Okay.
He went to David was born at the end of August, and that October he went to conference, and him and Tony were both ordained ministers that October. And the strange thing that happened is October 9th, 1955 was when he was ordained a minister, and October 9th, 2018 is when he passed away.
Wow. So he went. So after he's ordained a minister, how did God show him that he had work here to do?
Well,
San Carlos.
We built the church in Painesville, Perry Branch. He designed that building, and he did a lot of designing homes and stuff too, as he was in construction. So he designed the church building there in Perry, and we were part of that building being built and being established there. And he was presiding elder, and he just felt everybody that was there was baptized. We had a few visitors that came, and he just felt that God had something more for him to do than to just be a presiding elder there and preach. So we started praying. We fasted and prayed that God would direct us what he wanted us to do, where he wanted us to be. And the restlessness that Dan felt kept increasing. He felt that there was other ministers that could take care of the group that was there, and God had something else for him to do. And finally, after a while, he had a dream, and God showed him the triplets, the plateaus.
What do you mean the triplets?
That was here.
What are the triplets?
The triplet mountains that are out here.
Okay, the three mountain peaks.
3 mountains, yeah. And he said, "This is where I want you to be."
In the dream.
A hand pointed down to this spot here, and so he was all excited. He says, "God showed me where he wanted me to be, but he didn't tell me where it was." So here's more fasting and praying. Okay, God, you showed us where. Now how do we get there? Where is this place? And by this time our business had been established, and our business was doing well, and we had built another forever home.
Okay.
And this allotment, we had this beautiful.
It's basically the exact life that you didn't want, that you grew up with. You built your home, and then you move again. Okay.
We built the forever home. It was a nice split level home. We had a swimming pool in the backyard. We had over an acre of ground. We had a garden. We had the bottom part of the split level was like a game room.
Wow.
Because at that time, David was getting a little bit bigger, and I was expecting another baby at this time, and and that was Matthew. And
so all the babies the doctor said that you would never be able to carry.
Never be able to have, yeah. So the house was built so we had our office off to the side, and we could have young people over, and it would be nice. It was our forever home. And so we kept praying, and he had that dream. Well, he hurt his arm. One of the boards flipped up or something and twisted his elbow when he was doing on the job. And so the doctor told him, he says, you cannot use that arm. They wanted to put it in a cast, and he didn't want a cast. And so he says, well, we got to do something. We got to keep that stable, because if you use it, it might not heal right, and then you won't be able to use your arm. So he says, well, can I drive? And he says, well, if you rest your arm and just stable this hand, you can drive with the other hand. If you can drive with the other hand, you're okay, but don't use that elbow. So we got a sling for him so he could keep the arm stiff, and we left for California for conference in San Diego. So
from Ohio? You drove there?
From Ohio, yeah.
Okay.
We left. We went to San Diego for conference out there, and we met up with Brother Jim Heaps, and Brother Jim went with us, and we visited all the missions and branches in California. And when we were in Modesto, Brother Alex Robinson asked Dan if we would go back the southern route and stop in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and visit his sister and brother-in-law. His brother-in-law was a young minister in the church, but he had been inducted into the service, and they were stationed there. And so we went that way. And coming down the hill, coming into San Carlos, there was the triplets, the plateaus, and the river.
Everything from his dream.
Everything that was in the dream.
Wow.
So he pulled off the road, and he didn't say anything. He just pulled off the road and said, I'll be right back. Got out of the car and went down this little washway. And I could see that he was praying out there, but he didn't say anything going out there. So he was praying, and he came back, and he had this rock, and he put the rock underneath the seat of the car. And I says, what's that? And he says, that's a rock of promise. And so as we're going, little bits, he would tell me that we're bringing that rock back. We're gonna go home and sell everything and come back out here. And so by the time I got home, I had the dream that he had, and the trip out here, and how everything went. Had it all in place, how God provided what he wanted us to do and where he wanted us to be.
So it started with that desire of wanting to serve, making his life available to be used by God with his career and everything, and then just fasting and praying, God, what do you have for me?
Yeah.
For you guys moving to San Benito, was it similar or different, the process of understanding that God was calling you there?
The very first time we went to San Benito, I told Josh, I said, I'm going to warn you. The second you get there, you're going to fall in love, or you're going to tell me that you want to move there. And I said, and we're not going to be moving here. It's too soon, maybe later. And when it came time to when God was presenting to us that we needed to go, I wasn't as compliant as our sister. And I kept asking for signs and for God to reveal to me. Because again, I had a house, I had my life, and there was just a lot of unknowns, and I wanted to make sure that I was not taking from someone else's well. I wanted to be an addition, and I wasn't sure if I had those qualities in me to do that. And so, but God continuously revealed to us that isn't the case, and I always think back to how Christ went to the waters and just went to fishermen and asked if they would follow him, and they did. And they were just everyday men. They weren't anything special. Later on they became educated with some of the disciples, but one of his first people. They didn't have any fancy degrees. I don't have a degree. I don't have what I feel like I can bring a lot to the table, but I guess God sees something in me that I can.
Yeah, it reminds me of that phrase, and it's kind of a cliche, but it's true, is that God doesn't call the qualified, but he qualifies the called.
Exactly.
So that's a cool perspective on that.
I can relate to the restlessness. I would very often be in my truck driving to work or going to church and feel this prompting or this feeling in my heart that God, like there was something more that I needed to do, that there was some type of call on my heart that I didn't know what it was. You know, if someone looked on paper, I was ordained a minister, I was in a healthy branch, I had a beautiful wife, I had just, like, my son was just born, like all these things, right? But then I would always feel like something's missing. And then, Anna didn't mention this, but 2.5 years ago when we were there, God revealed a dream to her. And that dream kind of started to make us pay closer attention to this work that God was calling us to. And so for me, I think that I knew there was something I needed to do. I wasn't sure what it was yet. But when this past summer, when God started to really reveal what he wanted for us, and when I finally got there about a month ago, that feeling that was in my heart all those years, it was like magnified to the point where I finally felt content, at peace. Like I finally found my place where I was supposed to be. And I couldn't describe it, but I knew the feeling. And that small little feeling now is like every day I just feel that all the time. So I could relate to that when you said that.
That's cool. So you were sharing about you were driving back from conference down a different route because someone just asked you. It just seems like it's by coincidence, but when he's on that path, he sees this valley, this area that God had shown him in a dream, and he realizes, okay, now I know God's revealed where we're supposed to go. Yeah. Takes this rock and a promise and basically says, I'm committing to come back to this place. I'm going to return this rock from where I came. And maybe later we can go look at, because he actually put the rock in the structure of the building. We can show you later on, which is pretty cool.
Brought it back.
So then, how's your reaction now? You get back.
Okay, we got back, and we had a model house, so we put the model home up for sale, and then I'm pregnant again. And
it's funny
like
because
every milestone there's something.
It's okay. We can't leave. I'm pregnant. What if I have problems? What if there's problems that the first doctor said I was going to have? I'm not saying we can't go. We just have to wait till the baby's born. Okay. So the baby's born. So we were trying to sell the model. He says, well, we'll start getting rid of little, we'll start out little. We're going to get rid of the model home, and we'll keep working until the baby's born. So I said, okay. So we're, one day, a gentleman came from going by the route, seeing the for sale sign. He stopped. But because it was after hours of us being there, Dan had a sign that said office, and our house, our forever home that we were living in, was at the end of it was like a horseshoe road.
A cul-de-sac?
And we were down at the end.
Oh, okay.
So it went all the way around
the
road, but we were at the end, and we had the biggest lot, so we could have a garden.
Definitely
and
a forever home.
So the guy came in there and to talk about the model home, and he saw our home, and he says, well, I would like this home. Will you sell this home? So Dan says, well, we're not going to be able to move away until, because that was our reason for selling the model home. He says, we're not going to be able to move until August, because the baby was due at the end of July. So he says it'll at least be August before we could move. And the guy says, well, yeah. He says, let me bring my wife out this weekend and look. And so he asked the price. So Dan raised the price up $10,000. So he says, well...
And this was what, was this in the 60s or...
Pardon?
Was this in the 60s still?
Yes.
So 10,000...
Well, the end of 59 and...
Okay. So $10,000 is a lot more than it even is today. And it's still a lot today.
Yeah. The baby was born in 1960, so this was probably just at the very beginning of 60.
Okay.
And so when he raised the price, and he's thinking in his head, well, when we move to the reservation, we're going to have to build a building. Mm-hmm. So the $10,000 will build a building there. So the weekend came, and the gentleman brought his wife out and looked at the... She says, would you sell your furniture? And Dan, and Dan says, well, yeah, probably most of it. He says, my wife might want to keep some of it, but, most of it we could sell. So she says, well, give us a price for all of it together, and then give us a price individually if you want us to sell some of it. So, and the guy says, yeah, we want the house and we'll wait till August.
Wow.
My goodness.
So we put a price on the furniture, and...
On top of the $10,000.
On top of the $10,000.
Wow.
This is the furniture now. So there was a few pieces that I wanted to keep that my dad had bought for me. Mm-hmm. And so, but the rest of the stuff was just, regular furniture that you could replace easy. Nothing. It's just the two gifts that my dad had got. I wanted to keep those. That was easy. So they said, we'll buy all the furniture. So all we had to do is just move our personal stuff. Wow. So they brought the trailer out there, and we put the few things that we wanted to keep and move, so we'd have stuff to move there. And mostly baby things that we needed. And loaded up the little trailer, and Mark was born on the 3rd of August, and my mom, I kept telling her, I'm going to the hospital tonight. I know I'm going to the hospital tonight. And she says, you go, I'm going to, because she was going to have David and Matt both to take care of while I was in the hospital, plus move us, because we were moving everything out at that time. So we're packing our stuff, cleaning out the dresser drawers and everything, And I kept saying, I'm going to the hospital tonight. She says, you go tonight, and I'm going to get the bed next to you. She says, we'll leave Dad and Dan here with the babies. Because she thought I was teasing, but I did. I went to the hospital that night, and the next day they moved everything out of the house. And when I came home from the hospital, I came home to my mom's house, not my house. So
you went to the hospital from one house, and then while you're there, all your stuff is gone. Wow, and then you moved basically with a brand new born baby.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where we were. As soon as we were settled and could move, we had everything was already taken care of. But that was the point when Dan was offered this job where we could have made all kinds of money and been rich. But riches wasn't what we were after. Dan's prayer was, I'm not asking for wealth. I'm asking for a roof over our heads and a bite of bread on our table. That was...
And you were okay with that?
Oh, yes. As long as we were together, our family was together, and we weren't going hungry. Right. I didn't need that forever home. I needed... The bond that we had together was the most important thing, and have God in our lives was the most important thing.
Did you find that when you all started, like when you finally accepted the call, so to speak, that when God finally revealed it, did you feel like once that once the momentum started, that it almost was like at that point God was grabbing your hands and saying, we're doing this?
Yeah, go, time to go. When Dan said that he didn't want the job to make all that money, that we were ready to leave, we were heading to Arizona, my mom and dad said, if God is calling you, and they believe that this was definitely God calling Dan to do this work. If God is calling you, you don't stop. You go, because He'll take you through whatever you have to go through. We're here to support you however we can. We'll pray for you, do what we can for you, but don't stop following what God's calling you to do. He'll take care of you.
Tune in next week to part 2 to hear about many of the unexpected obstacles and amazing miracles that Sister D and her family experienced as they moved to Arizona and began to introduce the Church of Jesus Christ on the San Carlos Apache Reservation.